In the book of John, we are told that no greater love is there than a man lay down his life for a friend. It's a picture that we, in our society of action movies and heroes, that we can really, relate with. The notion of someone jumping on some railroad tracks and rescuing someone and putting their life on the line, or, a man stepping between his wife and an assailant and being willing to take a bullet for her. In film, we're shown this picture over and over again. And what a heroic moment that is. We think about soldiers in Iraq or in Afghanistan that are putting themselves in harm's way, not only for their country but also for their fellow comrades in arms. We hear these stories about men, soldiers, women that jump on grenades and sacrifice themselves for their friends, for their battalion, ultimately for their family, for their country. They're willing to die in order that someone else may live. What an amazing act of love this is. But I want to challenge us as dads to kind of rethink this a little bit and maybe think about it a little different way. Someone who isn't particularly caring, isn't particularly compassionate, they've been known to do these acts of love also. That someone who maybe hasn't shown to be that great of a person or a friend, they, in that moment of truth, they rise to the occasion and sacrifice themselves. And what a wonderful moment that is. We're very thankful that these people do this. I mean, what an amazing act of heroism that saves the lives of people. But what would it be, how different would it be to lay down your life while you're alive? This seems to be the trick. To sacrifice your life every day. To lay down your life every day on purpose while you're alive. This seems to be the real point of where the rubber meets the road, where real love comes into play. Anybody can step in front of a bullet for someone else. It takes a special moment of decision and willingness to lay aside self. But it's not always the case. In the late 90s, Robert Zemeckis made a film called Forrest Gump. I'm sure many of you have seen it. One of the characters in the film is a man named Lieutenant Dan. He is an officer in the military in Vietnam. And Lieutenant Dan comes from a long line of military officers, apparently all of which who have given their lives for the cause of freedom, or for that's the price that they've paid. There's actually a montage sequence where you see Lieutenant Dan's ancestor from the Revolutionary War, then the Civil War, then World War I, then World War II. It shows them actually dying on the battlefield one at a time. And it's made quite clear that Lieutenant Dan's desire is to also die on the field of battle. That's his destiny, that's his calling, and that's his responsibility. But there is a sense of pride, a sense of self-worth, a sense that he has to live up to what these other men have been in his lineage. So you could argue that this act of dying on the field of battle is actually something he's doing that's self-gratifying. He's doing it for himself. This is a very interesting point that quite a paradox we have, where we have a man laying down his life and literally being willing to die and spill his own blood. And yet it's really just something he's doing for himself. And I want to contrast that with us as fathers and as men laying down our lives every day. How different it is, how much harder it is. If you've seen the film, you know that Lieutenant Dan is actually rescued by Forrest Gump, and it goes into a downward spiral of destruction. And Forrest, of course, doesn't understand. Forrest is shown to be sort of a simple-minded man, and Lieutenant Dan believes that Forrest has robbed him of this glory and his destiny. But you know, it's a number of years go by, and Lieutenant Dan finally makes peace with what has happened to him. He is willing to consider adopting the life approach that Forrest has, and he's greatly rewarded for it. And he goes on to live a happy life. And so, but the interesting point here that I want you to take away from this is how it is when Lieutenant Dan decided to lay aside what self wanted to see what this life had to offer and how he could be of service to others. That is when his life begins to take a fruitful shape. He becomes a successful businessman. He meets the love of his life. He's able to then pour into others because he's no longer seeking after some goal of it for himself. And that's what we've got to do as dads. Our goals can't be to be some amazing father that everybody looks at and goes, oh God, well, I hope that my dad's like him, or I hope my husband's like him. There's a lot of self, gratification in that. We need to be focused on pouring our lives into our children for the purpose of creating amazing people that can then go on to have a joyous life, whether we get to share it with them or experience it with them or not. This is the trick, to lay down your life while you're still alive. That is the true act of love.